Warm greetings to the professors, keynote speakers, and to all who are present in this fifth international conference on primary and early childhood education. As we all know, that ratio and proportion is a new topic in KSSR in Malaysian system education. Importance of ratio and proportion in daily life and its usage need to be pondered, need to be counted on. Mathematics involves far more than accurate computation and rote memorization. It's not only computation and rote memorization, it's more on that. And pupils should be introduced to more conceptual knowledge, and they must be able to make connections within mathematics. We need to encourage the students to make sense and meaningful learning and produce new ideas in solving problems, not just the rote memorization. Okay, so pupils have difficulty acquiring the knowledge of ratio and proportion. It's a new topic, and some are still at the level of additive thinking, while their classmates already advanced to multiplicative thinking, and are thus mature enough to learn the topic. This research is to identify the Year 5 pupils' mental image about ratio and proportion. Therefore, my research question was, what is the Year 5 pupils' mental image of ratio and proportion? Secondly, to identify how Year 5 pupils represent ratio and proportion. And the research question sounded, how do Year 5 pupils represent ratio and proportion? Lastly, is to identify Year 5 pupils' meaning about ratio and proportion. And the third research question went to, what are the Year 5 pupils' meaning about ratio and proportion?
In this research, the qualitative case study is used as the research design using purposeful sampling. My samples are 7 year 5 pupils, 3 boys and 4 girls in a primary school, 3 high, 2 moderate, and 2 low. And the data collection, clinic interview technique conducted in 3 sessions. The interview protocols covered 26 tasks. And yeah, the mental images 10 interview, representations 5 interview, meaning 5 interview, and how did I do the data analysis? Is through the case and cross case analysis. So the data were from types of data were research notes. I used there were drawings from the samples, notes by the participants, return and behavioral responses to triangulate the data. So I also take the written data and their behavioral responses. So data was hand coded. Hand coding organizes the data using segmentation and then also bracketing the chunks of text. Then words are used to represent a category in the columns, and the ideas were organized in tables. As a result, 5 patterns of thoughts were discovered, which are symbolic, procedural, conceptual, figurative, and also practical real life situations. In the symbolic, I could see columns, concrete drawings. They also use using the concrete materials. They also use the concrete materials to symbolize. Uh, in the procedural, the comparison of quantities were like part to part, the ratios are part to whole, whole to part, one to many to many correspondences, interchanged, dual, partition, separation, sharing, repeated addition, arrays of rows and columns. These were all fine in the procedural way of answering. And in the conceptual theme, uh, multiplicative thinking was occurred, right? They used equivalent ratios, simplify ratios. They also had two equal ratios. They used the word doubling, tripling. They They answered by doubling, tripling, and halving, and also simplifying division. Also use the scala and functional relationship. In the figurative category, they drew patterns. They had the words jumping rows. They were jumping rows and columns. Also used the two dots and movement of head, fingers, hands, facial expressions. And in the practical category, I could see that they use real life situations like to cook ratio, rice to water is 1:2, one football played by 11 players, 1:11. Every child has 20 teeth, 1:20. They could come up with all these statements. Every person has 2 years, 1:2, one pencil and two rulers in a pencil case. So ratio one chair to one fan in a room, one umbrella shared by two-person. Here are some of the pictures that I could share in this study. The students' written work through symbolic, procedurally, conceptually, and also used real life situations. This is the comparison between the procedural way of answering, ratios and proportions. And also, if we look, this is how I have separate them into procedural and conceptual way of thinking. The essence of this study is when I saw the students could write ratio as fraction and percentage. They could relate ratio to fraction and percentage. Furthermore, surprisingly, they could state ratio as fraction, decimal, and percentage in a row. And that was surprising me. Very good finding. They also compared between three quantities and compared quantity with zero. Result, we can conclude that their transparent ideas are mainly on symbolic, verbal interpretations through concrete drawings, comparison of the part to whole, sharing, partitioning, and procedural explanations. Um, there were some translucent ideas on whole to part, conceptual or operative ideas like multiplicative thinking, interiorized ratios, within and within ratios. A few ideas on figurative explanations, ratios and proportions using real life situations, and also misconceptions were seen in the study. The results show that the Year 5 pupils had the ability to construct knowledge that makes sense and gave meaning of ratio as comparison of quantities, part-to-part comparisons, useful in daily routine belongings, cooking, and parts of the body. A part to whole was written in fractions. Meanwhile, proportions was meaningful to them as two equal ratios that are related multiplicatively. Textbooks usually don't teach fractions, decimals, or percentage integrated with ratio and proportion. So I think this study has a little bit given us the idea of what actually our students are supposed to be taught in ratio and proportion, and their conceptions show that we have to focus on this area. Thank you.